Pokemon fans, it's been a while. I'm so sorry for the lack of videos this year. I've spent 12 years on YouTube, so I figured it was about time to learn how to do some new things, and now I'm back in school for a while. But of course, there's been so much awesome Pokemon news in my absence. A few months ago, the entire Spaceworld 1997 demo of Pokemon Gold and Silver leaked to the public, so now we have access to an entire, legitimate, extremely early build of a Pokemon game, which as we all know went through some drastic changes throughout its development. It's extremely different from the final game and features a drastically altered Pokedex. 5 years ago, I talked a little bit about the demo and tried to reconstruct what it would have been like from eyewitness accounts on old forums. But now that we have the real thing to compare it to, I was way off. I really wanted to make a new Beta Secrets episode, especially since even more Beta Pokemon from Gen 1 have recently been revealed as well. But there's just so much here, virtually an entire game's worth of content, and Team Spaceworld, the brave men and women who deconstruct and translate the beta, release new discoveries about it almost daily. Any video I could make about it right now would be enormous and yet still incomplete. So what is there to do? Well, at the very least, I can make a top 10 of it in the meantime. I know this has probably already been done to death, but I take pride in the fact that no one is as extra about Pokemon as I am. So my list is guaranteed to be different than all the others out there. Some of the Pokemon that were cut are actually heartbreaking because they had the potential to become my favorite Pokemon of all time, not even joking. I love the Johto decks we ended up with, but the demo was just teeming with cuties we never got to meet, or some that we did get to meet much later, in drastically different forms. So today I'm going to share with you some of the coolest, cutest, weirdest, and awesomest discoveries in the Spaceworld 97 decks. Before we get the show on the road, I do want to give a major shout out to Team Spaceworld for putting in so much work to dig up all this information that we never would have had without them. Over 30 people worked hard on dumping this stuff just so that we could see it all. So please check out their findings over on their Google Doc or on the cutting room floor, which I will link both below. I also recommend following their Twitter accounts because they are constantly tweeting the most fascinating stuff. Now, without further ado, on to the countdown. Number 10, Twins. At first glance, Twins is a pretty neat concept by itself. A Gemini ghost is already pretty cool, and the fact that it looks so much like the basic ghost found in Pokemon Tower in Gen 1 had me already on board. But then last month, one of the Team Spaceworld members, Helix Chamber, tweeted a thread pointing out that Wobbuffet is suspiciously missing from the demo, and on top of that, in the final game, it has a ghost-type party sprite. These things do actually look a lot like Wobbuffet's tail, don't they? It seems pretty likely, though it is impossible to confirm, that these were actually an early working of Wobbuffet. They seem to kind of have a fascination with palindromes in this early dex, huh? Not only is Giraffrig's early sprite an actual mirror with 2 full giraffe heads, but there's an early Hitmontop too, which seems to have 2 faces. One for when it's right side up, and the other for when it's upside down. It's probably good that they narrowed down similar concepts for the final version, and I do love me some Wobbuffet, but this early ghostly version is pretty cool too. Number 9, Bombshika. It's interesting to see them playing around with type combos in this early beta, because there are a few in here that we have yet to see at all in the 10 plus years of Pokemon games we've had since these were designed. Among those interesting combos is Fire Water, which is what the seal Pokemon Bombshika has. It's a cool concept already, a seal that swims in water, but instead of lobbing beach balls at people, it throws fireballs. And the idea actually makes me think of Torkoal in the Gen 3 game, which is a fire-type tortoise that spouts steam. They never really seem to know what to do with fire types, even to this day, as they never really have very many available in the wild, and maybe it was just too hard to figure out how to work one with this odd combo in. It doesn't evolve, and with how very many Pokemon in the Gen 2 decks already don't have evolutions, it's not exactly a tragedy that one fewer one-off Pokemon is around. Still, it was nice to see them experiment a little, when to this day, we still don't have any Pokemon that fit this type combo, besides the very recent legendary Volcanion. Number 8, Ikari. Famously, Satoshi Tajiri has gone on record saying that when Pokemon are cut from the final game, their designs are saved and reworked and sometimes reused in later games. So there's a strong possibility that Mambu and Ikari here are final versions of Carvanha and Sharpedo, 2 of my favorite Pokemon. The similarities are definitely there, but there are some noticeable differences too. Carvanha in the final Gen 3 games is based obviously on a piranha, and they seem to be playing on the dangerous fish's weapon trope that's used in a lot of spy movies, since Sharpedo is not only a shark but also a torpedo. But in this version, Mambu is based on a harmless ocean sunfish, and evolves into Ikari, a water steel-type version of Sharpedo that isn't a weapon at all, but instead a shark that drags a giant metal anchor around. I have to say this is actually an extremely interesting design choice. The sprite itself looks great, and it has an eerie sunken pirate ship vibe to it that I'm digging. I actually assumed it was Ghost at first because of Delmuse in the Gen 7 games. What's even neater is that there's a third evolution in this line, Grotesque, which retains the steel typing and actually looks a little like Huntail from Gen 3. So if this is anything to go by, perhaps Huntail was also originally part of the Carvana line. This is a change I think again was for the better, because even though a powered-up member of the Sharpedo family would have been cool, I do enjoy Huntail and Gorobus' unique evolution style in the final game too. Another interesting detail to consider is that this specific line doesn't have the weaponized fish gimmick. That's not true of every line in this dex, since the early versions of Remoraid and Octillery are very overtly based on a pistol and a tank, when they're not so in the final. I can see why Game Freak backed off this idea and went for something a little less threat to civilian-y later on. Number 7. Kotora. Speaking of designs getting cut and reworked for later games, recently Helix Chamber released a video on his channel where he analyzed old footage of a Game Center CX interview with Satoshi Tajiri, and managed to make a pretty good argument for Kotora most likely having been one of the original missing no slots. Kotora was planned originally as a Gen 1 Pokemon, only to be cut and placed in the Gen 2 lineup, only to inevitably be cut again. I have to feel sorry for this little guy because that is a lot of rejection. Recently there was an interview with the Game Freak staff about how the original design process for Pokemon went, which is actually really interesting and I'll link it below. In it, Nishida, the designer of Pikachu, states that Pikachu went through several different iterations before they finally settled on the iconic design we know today, and that eventually stripes were added so that there would be something interesting to look at on its back sprite. I'm assuming that Kotora was cut from Gen 1 for being extremely similar to Pikachu after it settled on its final design, and then didn't make the final cut for Gen 2 either, just because there were already a lot of Pokemon that looked similar in that dex too. I'm not so convinced that he was cut for good though. I know Kotora is technically a tiger, but he does look extremely similar to Dedenne from Gen 6, don't you think? Number 6. Kyanpan. It seems like they sure did cut a lot of ghost types considering how few we got in the final game, and Kyanpan is easily the most interesting of those cut. It's so cute and derp, but it has that added creepy factor when you realize that it's supposed to be haunted. Its pre-evolution Norawa evolves at level 1 for some reason, and is based on the Japanese curse ritual Ushi no Tokimairi, where someone drives a nail into a straw doll to put a curse on someone else. So this whole cursed doll thing is kind of reminding me of the Shuppet line actually, which is another one of my favorites. The moves between the two Pokemon in this evolutionary line don't really match up or make sense in any kind of logical way, so it seems like either there was something fishy going on with obtaining these, or they were just super unfinished. Kyanpan itself appears to be based on a Jiangshi, or a hopping vampire from Chinese folklore, which is usually depicted with an Ofuda stuck to it, like this sprite here has. But I like to think that the significance of it being a bear, outside the panda linking it to China, is another connection to Bannet, like it's not only a zombie but also a teddy bear. That's probably a bit of a reach, but regardless, it's an interesting design and a nice looking sprite nonetheless, and would have made a cool and creepy ghost-type Pokemon. Number 5. Early versions of final Pokemon. Though these Pokemon did end up making it into the game, there are some early designs for them that are worth talking about. Blissey, for example, is just freaking adorable. Its design kinda makes me think of Pretty Bomber from Bomberman. Delibird actually had a worthwhile moveset early on, learning way more than present through level up, including Powder Snow at level 18 and Blizzard at level 54. It also looked way more like Santa, but that was probably changed to be a bit more secular. Umbreon is neat because for a decade now we've been wondering why there was no Poison-type evolution, and it turns out we've had it all along, because before Dark-type was widely implemented in this dex, Umbreon evolved with something called a Poison Stone, and was of course Poison-type. It makes me wonder what kind of duo Umbreon and Espeon would have made at this point, because their type advantages were completely flipped in the final. Politoed's early design is cute in its own huggable way, and Ariados's butt wears a different expression depending on whether it's facing the trainer or not. When it's facing its butt towards the trainer, it has a placid, calm expression, and when it's facing away, it has an angry, ready to battle and intimidate face. Just some neat little details that didn't quite translate into the final. Number 4. Early Legendaries. There aren't a ton of changes between the Legendaries in this game and the final, except for a few things worth mentioning for their novelty rather than necessarily their design. Snubbull doesn't look any different than the final game, but it's female only, doesn't evolve, and appears extremely late in the Pokédex. There's also a forest on the map called Buru Forest, named after Aomori, a real-life forest in Japan, but it also sounds similar to Buru, which is Snubbull's name. So there's speculation going around that Snubbull was this build's Celebi, given the lack of Ilex Forest and Celebi altogether. The decision to make it a common early game Pokemon after the fact, if this was true, is actually pretty comical. To think that thing outside of Goldenrod might have been mythical at one point. Now let's talk about Ho-Oh. For years, we have been outright puzzled by the fact that on April 1st, 1997, the first episode of the Pokemon anime aired and featured Ho-Oh, a Pokemon that we wouldn't get to meet in the games until 3 years later. But consider that the Spaceworld demo was showcased in 1997 and featured Ho-Oh. Though people have speculated for years that Ho-Oh was among the 20-something Pokemon cut from Gen 1 and reused in Gen 2, in fact, Omori has stated that Ho-Oh was never in Gen 1, and the timing of this demo supports that. Ho-Oh was just meant to tease the next games, and they failed to anticipate how much development would be delayed, and how late we'd actually get to Ho-Oh. I guess we can finally consider this mystery solved, even though this information has been right under our nose all along. Finally, the legendary dog's early designs are just hilarious. They straight up look like Neopets, or My Little Ponies, or both. Lugia is nowhere to be seen in the demo, but that's in line with what we already know about Lugia being created specifically for the second movie, which came out several months before Gold and Silver in Japan. Number 3. The babies. I'm not usually a fan of baby Pokemon, because they really don't have much of a mechanical purpose in the game besides making breeding more of a pain since you can't breed two babies together, and acting as dex filler. So it's probably a good thing that a majority of these guys were cut. I don't know if the plan was to give every single Pokemon a pre-evolution eventually, just to make the breeding mechanic more interesting. Like that all Pokemon that hatch from eggs were going to start as babies, so they had to make a baby for every species. But narrowing it down to the handful we got in the final game was probably a good call, even if it's less realistic. There are some standout adorable designs in this lot though. My personal favorite is this early Mime Jr. I literally can't decide which Mime Jr. I love more, the beta or the final we got in Gen 4. Look at this round, perfect boy. Pichu, I dare say, was better before. Look at how simple and sweet this design is. And a few of the babies that didn't make the cut have some interesting features. Manja is awesome. This baby Doduo has the third mysterious disappearing head, and Paris kinda looks like an early mushroom version of Flabebe, doesn't it? And of course, this little baby Meowth. I want to hug it and take it home! Number 2. Aimon. One of the best discoveries and best faces in this demo is what could have been a steel-type evolution of Ditto called Aimon. It would have evolved by trading a Ditto holding a metal coat to another game. Though in the actual data, Aimon is still a normal type, and it has no data or moves or stats other than placeholders. This brings up so many questions. How would it function? What would it do? Would it transform into a steel-type version of every Pokemon in the game? Would we essentially get a Metal Cap Mario Pokemon and end up with cool metal copies? Would it be a steel type at all? Honestly, I love the possibilities of what this thing could have been, but if it really would have been a steel type equivalent of Ditto, I kinda understand why it didn't make the cut. Imagine what a pain that would have been to implement and balance. Of course, the speculation has been renewed now thanks to Meltan, our mysterious steel type Pokemon Go friend with some connection, somehow, to Ditto. And the number 1 beta Pokemon is Ririne and Belvoyant. When I saw this Pokemon the day of the leaks, my heart shattered. It's like seeing a Mirrorland version of yourself with a lifelong best friend you could have met if things had just worked out a little differently somehow, somewhere down the line. Without a doubt, this would have been my all-time favorite Pokemon if it had been released. It's a black cat, but designed to be elegant rather than mischievous like Purloin. It has a bell on its tail and a moon on its forehead. It's literally Luna the Pokemon. It is the ultimate cat. It would have been my best friend for life. I almost can't forgive Game Freak for nixing it. It eventually was cut when Umbreon was made a dark type, and the design maybe was reworked into Skitty. But I just can't get over it. It's almost like being punched in the gut. The disappointment that this was never a Pokemon, it almost feels unfair. We have so many dogs, more than one per gen sometimes, and yet Gen 2's cat was cut? It's like the biggest ripoff of the last decade. It's a scam. I've been tricked. Here I've been waiting for this Pokemon all my life when it's already come and gone without me. So on that depressing note, we're out of numbers, so that's all for today. I hope eventually to find a way to organize this overwhelming amount of beta information into a beta secrets video. But for now, I'll urge you again to go straight to the source and follow Team Spaceworld for all their exciting discoveries. Thanks for being patient with me while I work out how to balance all these new obligations in my life, and hopefully I can find some way to upload more frequently as I go. But for now, thanks for watching and stick around for more videos. Eventually. See ya!